to our guest, Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz of Columbia. The most optimistic scenario is a Japan-like malaise for another decade or possibly two. And Professor, that begs the question, what's the worst-case scenario?
Well, the worst-case scenario is a double dip or many double dips of considerable serious magnitude. When I said a Japanese-style malaise, it's very hard to know how long this will last. It could be a half decade. It could be longer. The Japanese malaise lasted, of course, 2 decades. I hope ours won't last anywhere near as long. But the United States faces 2 serious challenges. We have to restructure our economy. We overbuilt in real estate. There's changing global comparative advantage, say in manufacturing. And unfortunately, when the economy is weak, it's hard to make the investments that you need to restructure.
How does this work for real live human beings who are not getting jobs? How could they even distinguish between what we have now and the recession? Unemployment is growing back again towards double digits. GDP is stagnant at best and sloping downward. What's the answer for them? The austerity folks would say maybe some more pain now. Is that a better alternative than 20 years of this?
Well, more pain now, unfortunately, will only make things worse, not only now, but in the future. You don't provide the basis of economic growth by having negative economic growth. In fact, the evidence is pretty strong that growth, once it gets restored, takes off from the lower base that you've established. So it's not like you push something down and it bounces way back. It's more like you push something down, and once you get growth, it starts from that very low base. So austerity is not only a recipe for more pain now, it's really a recipe for more pain in years to come.
Right, so you just referenced it, but a year or so ago there was a lot of talk about the shape of the recovery. Would it be a V, a W, an upside down, inverted square root sign? What you just described sounds to me like an L. Is that your forecast for the most likely scenario?
That's the most likely scenario. An L, I sometimes say a squiggly L where there's some bumps down and maybe a few bumps up. That's what I thought was likely going to happen back in 2008 when the crisis began, 2009. You mentioned the square root. We went way down as a result of inventory decumulation, and that was one of those cases where there's a little bit of a rubber band effect where because you go too far down, you push it back up. But we're well out of that kind of volatility caused by excessive inventory decumulation. There is really no source of bounce that one can see in the economy right now.
We've got a massive debt situation afflicting this country. We've got the baby boomers, all set to retire, Generation X et al., are set to pick up the tab. Is more stimulus the answer to this debt crisis? And what's the end game here?
Well, more stimulus is about the only thing that we can do. One of the other things that we can do is restructure the debt. 1/4 of all Americans owe more money on their home than the value of their house. The home used to be the retirement account, something to pay for the kids' education. No longer true. It's a liability. And we need to restructure these debts. In corporations, we understand the principle. We have something called Chapter 11, which is designed to keep the corporations going, keep jobs, and give the corporation, the company, a fresh start. We need to do that for all Americans. We need to have what I call a homeowners Chapter 11, to get these millions and millions of Americans who are being dragged down by the excessive debt, pushed by the mortgage companies and the banks, restructure it, and give them a fresh start. It doesn't do anybody any good to force these people out of their homes. An economy in which you have homeless people and empty homes doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And that's where we're going.
Right, so I know we have to wrap, and I know this opens up a whole other can of worms, but I want to ask you, did you see anything in the debt ceiling deal that got done, let's forget the cantankerous negotiations for a second, in the deal itself, that gives you any hope that we're a step closer to resolving our problems?
No, it actually leaves me very pessimistic, because if I had been talking and engaged in that kind of discussion, I would have gone back to 2001, where we had a 2% of GDP surplus. And Greenspan argued that we needed to have a tax cut, because if we didn't, we would pay off the entire national debt, and it would be difficult for him to conduct monetary policy. So in a span of just a decade, we went from this almost unmanageable surplus to an unmanageable deficit. And to answer the question of what we ought to do, all you need to do is to think about, how do we go from there to here? 4 things made a big difference. In fact, account for almost all the difference. And if we reverse those 4 things, we're actually home easy. And what are those 4 things? A tax cut for the rich beyond our ability to afford, trillion-dollar wars that have not improved our security, a major economic downturn, put America back to work, and our tax revenues will increase enormously, and finally, a medical Part D of Medicare Part D, where we put a provision that we not negotiate with the drug companies, estimated the cost, but various people give them various estimates, as much as $1 trillion in a decade. Right. You get rid of those 4 things, and we're actually in pretty sound basis.